I'd originally set my 2025 reading goal to 20 books, and then I realized that I had to set a TBR for 25 books because it's 2025. Like, there's no other possibility. So I had no choice. I had to bump up my reading goal. In all seriousness, though, it was actually kind of hard to narrow it down to just 25. Like, perusing my shelves, there were so many extra ones that I really wanted to include. And I mean, I'm going to talk about 25-ish because there are some where I talk about the first book in a series, but I actually will be reading some or all of the sequels. We can't have one series taking up too much real estate in this precious list. Quick sidebar, I'm going to briefly talk about a couple of books that are not technically on this list, but I thought I'd mention them anyway because I started them in 2024, but we'll finish them this year. I've also got a fan fiction, and I've also got a couple of books that I'm reading for 2 different book clubs. So I thought I would just at least mention them. I'm currently reading Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, which is book 4 in the Stormlight Archive. We're not very far. We still have so long to go. It's going to take me a while. I'm also reading Hotshot by Sarcast City, which is an arcane fan fiction, specifically a Kate Vi/Violin fanfic. And I'm really enjoying that. I also have Forest of Noise by Musab Abu Toha. A couple of my close friends and I recently started a book club, and this is the first book that we're going to be reading. It's a collection of poetry by a Palestinian author, and I have already started reading this one. So we'll be continuing that over the next couple of weeks. And then my Discord book club for January and February, we're reading One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, which is a romantasy that I've heard some really fantastic things about, and I'm very excited to be reading this one and discussing it over on Discord. Link down below. I think that's everything that I need to mention right now. Let's get onto the official 25 books I would like to read in 2025. First up, we have standalones, or first books in series. Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Starting things off with one I have been kicking myself for not having read this yet. It came out in 2020. I've got my grubby little hands on an early copy of this book, and yet, I still haven't read it. I loved Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, so I was so excited to hear that the author was going to be coming out with another book. And since this is released, I've heard so many fantastic reviews about Piranesi, and it's just only made me more and more excited to pick it up. But here we are, 4.5 years later, nothing read. I don't know what to tell you. Dark Rise by C.S. Pacat. This is the first book in a YA fantasy series, and I think I was sent a copy of this book from the publisher when it first came out, but I didn't really think much about this book until I remember seeing several videos from Lily of Lily Can't Stop Reading, absolutely raving about this book and this series, and it just got me really excited to pick it up. I do also have a copy of the sequel, Dark Air, and I managed to get both of them signed by the author at Sydney Writers' Festival. Sorry, I just had a moment because I realized that the festival was back in May of 2024, but it felt like it happened 2 months ago. So for some reason, that just absolutely broke my brain a little bit. But anyway, Dark Rise, very excited to give this a go. I think there's a Dark King. Well, I don't need to know anymore. Plus, it's by an Australian author as well. So love that. Pride and Prejudice. Yes, I have not read Pride and Prejudice, nor have I seen the 2005 film or the 1995 miniseries. I think I mentioned in one of my last videos that I'm planning on doing a vlog where I read Pride and Prejudice for the first time, but also watch those adaptations. I am somewhat familiar with the story of Pride and Prejudice. It is obviously very well known, and I have seen some modern reimaginings of it, including Lizzie Bennet Diaries, and I discovered that Bridget Jones's Diary is a loose adaptation of it as well. But anyway, I'm very excited to actually read and watch Pride and Prejudice for the first time. I think it's going to be a fun experience. So yes, we'll be vlogging that. Wicked by Gregory Maguire. I recently watched the film, and I've also seen the musical live a couple of times and adore it. And at some point, I did also own a copy of Wicked, but just never got around to reading it, and I don't know if I still have it. To be fair, most of my books are currently in storage. I am excited to dip into the book which the musical was adapted from, though I'm very aware that there are some key differences between the two, and I have loose plans to buddy read this with Chloe and Momo, who are also fans of Wicked, so I think that's going to be a really fun experience to dive into the book and just kind of explore more of the world in more detail, more darkness too, and discuss it with other Wicked fans at the same time. Rouge by Mona Awad, who is the author of Bunny, which I loved. And again, just kicking myself. Why haven't I read this yet? Say it together. for no good reason. It's a horror-tinged gothic fairy tale and kind of explores the pursuit of youth and beauty. And I'm just incredibly excited to dip into this one. So it's on the list, so it must happen. I've taken so long to edit this video. We Love You Bunny by Mona Awad has also been announced. Mega excitement here, but this list cannot be changed. It's locked in, baby. But I'm just sliding in to mention it because I am very excited about that book. Sugar Baby by Celine St. Clair. This is one who follows a woman who is in a bit of a life rut when she meets someone called Emily, who is a sugar baby. And I think she gets kind of drawn into that intoxicating world. Really intrigued by this one, and the font is huge, so I feel like it might be a bit of a breeze to get through this one. It says it's about beauty and greed, desire and delusion. Very excited to dip into this one. Next, we have the books I'd like to reread. I decided to put some rereads on my list for two main reasons. First of all, I would really like to revisit some of my favorites, just for some kind of nostalgic comfort reading. It's not something I prioritize often enough, so I wanted to be a bit intentional with that this year. And then there are also some rereads which similarly are for favorite books, but also ones in series, and I would very much like to continue reading the series and want to refresh myself on the stories and the world. Starting with the first category of just all-time favorites, I would really like to dive back into. We have The Host by Stephanie Meyer, and this has like an alien species that is like parasitic in that it invades the human body and takes over the consciousness of that body, and the human is no more, except sometimes that original human consciousness doesn't exactly fade away, and there are two minds trapped in one body, which is exactly what happens to the main character in this one. This is one of the books that I did reread a fair few times when I first kind of read it, but it's been a while since I've picked this up, and I really hope that it does hold up. I also have The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak in this amazing edition that my lovely friend Red made for me. I think it's like the anniversary hardback edition, and she did like some collage and painting and stuff, and I adore this so much. And this is one of my all-time favorite books, a World War II historical novel narrated from Death's perspective as he crosses paths with this little girl who steals books, and her family harbors a Jewish man, and it is brilliant. And I would just really like to experience this again. I think I just need a therapeutic cry. Okay, I've already finished reading this. I really need to edit videos quicker. Here's just a quick look at how the reading experience went.
Oh, f*** you.
The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, and technically The Obelisk Gate as well, which is book 2 in the Broken Earth trilogy. I will actually talk a little bit more about my reading of this series in 2025 in a later part of the video, in the sequels section. But the Fifth Season is a masterpiece. It is brilliant. The characters, the world, like the magic. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to pick this up again, as well as book 2, as I mentioned. Exactly, the blurbs. Astounding, amazing, powerful, brilliant. I agree wholeheartedly. And the last book/books that is included in this category is The Hunger Games by Susanna Clarke. All right, what I obviously meant to say was Suzanne Collins. Good God. I've been wanting to reread the Hunger Games trilogy for a really long time. It is a series I think I've read a couple of times now, or at least the first 2 books I think I've reread. I can't remember if I've read Mockingjay twice or not. At least the last time I read it, I found that it definitely did still hold up. I think it's unfortunately pretty timely, and it was just such an important book in my reading journey. And my desire to reread this trilogy has just continued to grow as Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes came out, and then we also have Sunrise on the Reaping coming out in 2025 as well. So I think it's just a really good time for me to dive back into this series and continue reading some of the other books in the series that I haven't read yet. Now for the sequels. One of my reading goals for 2025 is to prioritize continuing or completing series. So a big focus for me is to read as many sequels as possible. I have a nice list here of the ones that I'm most excited to read, and the first of which is The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. This is a prime example of my issues with finishing series for no good reason. 0 good reasons. I read the 5th season back in 2020, and I think I reread it in 2021 just before I read the sequel, The Obelisk Gate, and I fully intended to pick up the 3rd book straight away, but just never got around to it. And even though I haven't finished it yet, I do consider this one of my all-time favorite series. I'm pretty confident that this is going to live up to the rest of the series. I don't think it's going to let me down, which just makes no sense. Again, why have I not finished the series? I wish I could answer, but I have no good reason. so shame on me. Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 5th book in the Stormlight archive and will complete the first arc of this series. And obviously, as I mentioned, I'm currently in the middle of Rhythm of War, so it'll probably be a little while before I get to Wind and Truth, but I don't want to leave as much time between books 4 and 5 as I did between books 3 and 4, because there's just so much to these books, so many characters and details about the world. It's very complex, and I'm just shooting myself in the foot and setting myself up to forget every important detail if I wait too long. So, adding it to the list, Wind and Truth will happen this year. Persepolis Rising by James S.A. Corey. This is the 7th book in the Expanse series. I finished reading book 6 late last year, and it had also been a few years since I'd read the previous book in the series, so I'm trying to keep the momentum going. I have really thoroughly enjoyed this epic sci-fi series so far, and I believe that there's a little bit of a time jump between book 6 and book 7, so I'm very interested to see what's going to happen in this next kind of era of the series. Leather and Lark by Bryn Weaver. This is the 2nd book in the Ruinous Love trilogy and sequel to Butcher and Blackbird, which is like a dark romance about serial killers who only target other serial killers. I surprised myself and really enjoyed the first book in this series, so I'm excited to continue, and this one will explore a different couple. The characters we do obviously meet in the first book as side characters, and the 3rd book in this series is called Scythe and Sparrow, and that comes out February of 2025, so I'm hoping to also get around to reading the 3rd book not too soon after. Broken Web by Laurie M. Lee, which is the sequel to Forest of Souls. It's the 2nd book in, the Shamanborn trilogy, and the 3rd book came out in 2024. I read Forest of Souls probably in 2021, and it was such a pleasant surprise how much I ended up enjoying Forest of Souls. So I think I ended up ordering myself a copy of Broken Web straight away, fully with the intention of continuing it as soon as possible, and here we are a few years later. I feel like I might need to give myself a little bit of a refresher with Forest of Souls and see if I can find just a recap or something somewhere. But I do remember it kind of giving me Shadow and Bone vibes. Across the Green Grass Fields by Seanan McGuire, which is book 6 in the Wayward Children series, a series that I really love. It's a series of companion novellas, and some of them do kind of continue on from other ones a little more directly. But for a lot of the books, we're following different characters, so thankfully I can probably get away with not rereading the previous 5 books in this series, since it has been a while. So this is a portal fantasy series, and this one we have a girl who discovers a portal to a land filled with centaurs and unicorns. The Atlas Complex by Olivia Blake. I read the Atlas 6 many moons ago. This is definitely a series where I've heard quite mixed things about it. Some people really love it, some people really dislike it, and as the books have come out, I've been hearing more mixed, skewing slightly more negatively, so I've just become a bit hesitant to pick up the Atlas Paradox, but also book 3, the Atlas Complex. And it was in that moment that I did not in fact realize I had messed up at the start. I was meant to say the Atlas Paradox initially, but to be honest, I think I'm just confused with all these book title names where there's one word different. My poor little brain just can't handle it. But I own all of the books, so I might as well give them a jolly good go and see what I think of them. I am really looking forward to diving back in to this magical dark academia type of story, and I really hope I end up enjoying it, but we'll see. My last sequel to discuss today is Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner. So the first book in this series is Godkiller, which I read back in June for the Breath of the Wildathon. I really enjoyed reading Godkiller. I did listen to the audiobook for that one, which was a little bit of a risk for me, as I don't often enjoy reading fantasy, especially new to me fantasy, on audio, just because I have a very fickle mind. She likes to wander far and wide, and with stories that are quite heavy on the world building, I'm more likely to miss kind of crucial details. So I tend to steer clear of fantasy on audio. However, I did decide to try listening to Godkiller, and it was a great time.
That was Godkiller by Hannah Kaner.
Would recommend. I really did enjoy listening to it.
An audiobook from...
I'm actually undecided if I'll do audio for this one or not. I'll see how I'm feeling. And finally, my most anticipated 2025 releases. I'm not the type of person to read things necessarily in a timely manner, and rather than doing a whole separate video talking about my most anticipated releases of 2025, where historically I'm likely to just not get around to reading those, in that year. I thought instead I would focus on the books that are at the very tippity top of my anticipated list and put those onto my TBR for 2025 so that I'm more likely to actually get around to them shortly after they come out. So to kick off this category, we have Calabasas by R.F. Kuang, which publishes in August of this year. Over the last couple of years, I've really kind of fallen in love with R.F. Kuang as an author. And now that I've read a few of her books, I can pretty confidently say that she's a favorite author. So I'm really excited about her upcoming release. Calabasas is a dark academia fantasy where we have these two graduate students who, I believe it's like a rivalry to lovers situation, and they have to travel into hell to save their professor's soul. Which sounds just... And it's also described as Dante's Inferno meets Piranesi. How serendipitous. Piranesi is on this list. It sounds exactly up my alley. I'm so excited about Calabasas. You have no idea. Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This one's coming out in June. All I know about this one is that there's vampires and it's queer. I don't need to know any more. I am so excited. Victoria V.E. Schwab is an autobi author for me as well. So it was gonna happen no matter what. Fable for the End of the World by Ava Reid, which comes out in March. This one is described as The Last of Us meets The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Guys, you're killing me with all these comparisons. But this is a standalone dystopian romance, which is also queer. It is sapphic. I'm very excited. Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, which also comes out in March of 2025. And this is another book in the Hunger Games series, another prequel where we're following the Hunger Games that Haymitch participated in. You have no idea how excited I am for this. So yes, as I mentioned, I will be rereading all the Hunger Games trilogy. I'm planning on reading A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes as well, and then we'll pick up Sunrise on the Reaping. I am loosely hoping to start my reread of this series in the lead up to Sunrise coming out, but we'll just have to see how life goes. But I'm so excited about this. Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yambao, which actually came out in January. So this one is out in the world. I might have to order myself a copy soon. This one follows a woman who inherits a pawn shop where people can sell their regrets. I think there's a bit of a romance in here as well. It just sounds like a really magical and whimsical story. And I'm so excited to pick this up. And also the cover, Death of the Author by Nettie Okorafor, which also came out in January. Okorafor is the author of the Binti series, which I've read and really enjoyed. So I was very excited to hear that they were coming out with another book. And this follows a woman who is an author. And I think in a spur of the moment decision, she starts to write a story that's very unlike all the other books that she's written. And it's a sci-fi novel about androids and AI after the extinction of the human race. I think there's also some disability rep in here as well, but I'm just very excited to pick this one up. Having loved the Binti series and having a book about books. The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, which is coming out in May, and this is from the same author of the One Dark Window Shepherd King series. This is a romantasy, and to be quite frank, I know nothing about the story. I work for the publisher that is publishing this in Australia, and one of my co-workers read it and was just instant favorite and has been raving about it for months. So I was just I gotta see what's up. I gotta know why she's so obsessed with this. A gothic, mist-cloaked tale of a prophetess who is forced beyond the safety of her cloister in an impossible quest to defeat the gods with the one knight whose future is beyond her sight. I'm just really intrigued and very excited to see what the hype from this one person is about. And last but certainly not least, if you've been counting, you'll know that this is a sneaky bonus. I didn't include this in the list because it doesn't actually technically have a release date yet, but I didn't want to not mention it. So this is the very ultra secret 26th book that I could potentially read in 2025, depending on the release date. The Strength of the Few by James Islington. This is the sequel to The Will of the Many, which was my favorite book of 2024. Hands down, the one that I am most anticipating, which is why I had to, at the very least, mention it, if not officially include it in the list of 25. The Will of the Many took over.
It's...
Existential crisis.
It was so good.
I have so many questions. It was so engaging and entertaining and satisfying and a bit of a cliffhanger. I'm mad that I wasn't able to read the next book instantly, so I will be picking it up as soon as it releases. Thank you very much. So those are the 25-ish books that I am planning on reading throughout 2025. Just looking through this list of books is getting me very excited. So many exciting stories to like revisit or continue or explore for the first time. Let me know in the comments what books you're looking forward to getting to in 2025. And that's all from me. I will see you soon with another video, but until then, bye!